Hey everybody.
Hi guys, we're back.
We are back. We're going to wait for just a few moments till everybody jumps on board, but let's do a little bit of a review. Sorry, we lost our feed there for a second. Looks like you guys are jumping back on. What we're doing here, we're making our year-end wrap project from beadshop.com. And let me kind of clear the waters, and we'll just take this moment, or clear the decks here, I guess. Take this moment to just put the project in front and center so you guys can see what we're doing, and we're just gonna pick right up. So the year-end wrap bracelet, and if you are watching this later, we're gonna kind of put these together on YouTube, so we'll have a part 1 and a part 2, so you'll be able to watch this fairly seamlessly, I think. But the project, we were talking about the tools and materials that we're using for this piece. So we've got the keystone chain, and we use about 2 feet of this chain. And then we supplement that wrap or that chain with a strand of our 4mm opaque yellow copper fire polish, and our let me look here, the milky alexandrite moon dust in 6mm. And then when we cut out earlier, we were talking about which spacers and things to use. In this one, we used our temple beads, but in this other colorway that we did, kind of this green and silver colorway, let me push this over the side, we used, instead of those temples, we used these little shadows. And you guys know how much we love the shadows in all sizes.
Some of us love them more than others.
Some of us do love them more than others. I'm looking in the mirror, Kate Richburg. We also used, for the beads, we used the Nebula Wasabi green Czech fire polish, and we used this prairie green, which kind of has a, I would almost call that a green tourmaline kind of a color.
It's got a little bit of a black component to it somewhere.
It's just, yeah. I think it's just delicious. And then when I was designing this piece, I wanted something that was kind of the focal point, right? So I threw in this square connector from our Vintage Finds collection for this guy. And then on this side, also from our Vintage Finds, we threw in the the Infinity Clover in this gray color. And both of these, I think, I don't know, I wanted to throw in something that maybe was a little unusual, you know, and I think that a lot of people admire and love the Vintage Finds, but they always don't know how to incorporate it, because we use them in a lot of big things.
Right.
Janice uses them in malas. We use it in our Born Yesterday project. So you know, I think that they work really well in this.
Well, they feel like a focal, but they don't always. You can play with where you position
where
that
you
focal.
Put it. Yeah, exactly. Then the other thing, you know, we have these. Let me reach for them. Our Czech glass, these Saturn beads that have this Picasso finish to them. This one is the Saturn beads, and this one's called mustard, this color. And then for the blue colorway, they're called green aqua. And I just, when we got these in, this is an oldie but goodie. This bead has been around a long time, this style of bead. And I so dig it. I love them. And you can see this one is transparent, this one's opaque. And I thought that this mustard one really, I think, played nicely with that, the yellow copper Picasso Czech fire polish, this guy here. And Emily, you pulled this green palette together,
I did.
Right?
Yeah. You know, it's funny, if anybody asked me my favorite color, I would say it was blue. But I probably end up having more green beads than anything. And for me, recently, because I have part of my wardrobe, big part of my wardrobe being a gray palette, I find myself really drawn to bringing in gray with other colors. I especially like gray and yellow together. But to sort of tone down that size, I thought having it closer to the keyhole chain size, and the tone was similar, that kind of made those two marry up a little bit nicer.
Yeah, really let them play together nicely in the sandbox, sometimes I like to say. Well, so when I was designing this piece, where I actually started was right here, this section here. And I want to, you can see our full layout of, we call them our project maps. You can see our full project maps on beadshop.com. Am I in a good,
You are.
good range here, Bran?
Yeah. Yes.
So you guys can see. You can see our project maps, I think, are really, really helpful. So you can kind of see just the whole map of the piece. But where I started with this, like I said, I started here because this really is kind of our focal, right? And I knew that I would have to wire wrap this, right? So I experimented a little bit with the wire wrapping. I played around a little bit with how I wanted to position this piece. And so, can I use your wrist?
Sure.
Put your wrist here in the middle. What I did was, when I was playing around with it, I laid this piece. I tried a bunch of different ones that we had, some bigger, some smaller, and I laid this piece on my wrist because I wanted to see, I didn't want it to be too wide. If it was too wide, it would have sat funny.
Right.
Right? It would have, if it was a little bigger, the wire wrap would have been kind of out here on the sides of your wrist, and I think it would have been a little bit awkward. So that's why I chose this side. And for some of you who may have a little bit of a smaller wrist, like with Emily, I could probably put that on the diagonal and it would be fine. For me, when I was playing around with it,
Having it on the
having
straight.
it on the diagonal was, sorry, Brian, is that okay?
Yeah.
Having it on the diagonal made it just slightly too big. So I turned it. And, you know, we always say that a bracelet, the measurements for a bracelet need to be right on. A necklace we can fudge a little.
Yeah, I mean, rings, bracelets, anklets, they have that part of that sizing is a function.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
allows you to keep
If
it
it's
on
too
or
big, yeah,
not.
it falls off, right? Exactly.
Too small and it doesn't fit.
Yeah. So this is the section that we made first, or that I made first, and that I'm going to show you how to do first. Then I just started to kind of put my beads together, and this was the second section I did. I did the beaded section. And I thought, I don't want any of these beads to go to waste, so I'm going to use the whole strand. So I strung these with the same, the unifier here was that temple bead, so that the spacer was all the same. But I wanted another focal-ish, a break in there, so that's where this kind of larger, the negative shape or negative space that this creates around it, I think is a nice kind of pause in the middle.
Yeah.
Right?
So there was questions about how weighty these vintage find pieces are, and they actually are not very weighty.
No, they're weighty enough.
Yeah, and one of the things that I kind of look for when I see things that I don't know if I want to buy them or not, but I kind of look for them to have lots of options, and many of these vintage finds have multiple connectors, so that's kind of nice. We could use this one on the diagonal, or we could use it on the square,
Right.
kind of either way.
Either way.
And I'd like to have it have some interest to it, you know?
And it's
Not be as consistent maybe as a
Right.
glass bead.
And especially with this Saturn, how
Snuggle
it
in there.
tapers. Yeah, it'll snug right. It'll snug right in there and fit nicely. So again, when you are creating the length or the overall length of this piece, especially if this is the section that's going to sit on top of your wrist, you're going to you're going to want to adjust for the length here, either this way or turning it to.
And you know
or
what? I
turning
just
it to the
noticed something
side.
about this vintage find. It doesn't actually have a center hole.
Oh,
don't
this
think-
one doesn't? I thought it did. Yeah, it does.
No,
this
but
one
this
does.
particular one
Oh,
does
how
not.
funny. That one doesn't. Isn't that funny? Well, these are all handmade, so
Oh,
sometimes...
well, they started it on that side, but they didn't quite
but
finish.
they didn't quite finish. Didn't quite go all the way through. So this section here that I did, all of these 6mm and all of these 4mm. So that was my second component that I had. So then I had this guy here, and then I had this strand here. And then it was pretty much a no-brainer for me. What I did was I had this component, and Brandon, I'm going to kind of wrap this around so you can, I don't know if I'm, again, in that right position, but I pretty much just laid this guy on, and I attached some chain. Okay, and I attached some chain and I wrapped, and I was trying to get something that was fairly even, and I knew that, so I wrapped this chain around, kind of noted a measurement, and then I wrapped this strand around and also noted my measurement. And you can see on both sides how I've got about 3 wraps on the underside, and then this comes around and clasps kind of in the front. So you do, like I say, you can make this keyhole chain section a little longer or a little shorter. This is where I do my adjusting for the length. You can also wear this as a necklace, as a layering necklace.
Absolutely.
For sure. So, and you could make this, like if you wanted more chain or more beads, just make it longer.
Well, and you can also, you can make it longer or sub out, mix another strand of these or another strand of these.
Right.
Absolutely.
You could mix these two together. There's, this is, I think, a really great stopping off or jumping off point.
One of the things I love about this is kind of my favorite pattern, and a pattern I used a lot.
Kind of a dot dash kind of pattern.
Yeah, sort of. I think sometimes I think of it as small, large, small, large. It echoes a little bit what chain looks like to me.
Right, yeah.
It's just a little bit of a relationship that's not an exact relationship, not a, oh, look, that matches sort of relationship, but it has some connection to chain. Chain has a link that goes east-west and a link that goes north-south. And those two things kind of marry up with one another.
And kind of mix up nicely,
Yeah, they mix up beautifully.
The other silhouette that I was trying to achieve with this is I wanted a slim silhouette. I didn't want anything too large or too small. So this does have a little bit of variation in thickness, but I intentionally chose this 4 millimeter because it was the same width as this keyhole.
Right. Yeah. Okay. No, that gives it the same volume.
Yeah. I thought it was a fun little project. I made it right at my desk.
When I look at things like this, I often think about playing with proportions, and so proportion can be large to small. Proportion could be short to long. Proportion could be light to dark. To me, it's how you mix those contrasts that make it sort of interesting. I like my findings, my clasps and things like that to blend pretty seamlessly with the piece.
To complement them if they,
Yep, and
so they don't look like strangers.
At
the party, right?
Don't look like who put you together?
Yeah. Where are you from? Well, we have, so I'm going to jump in and I'm going to start just as I started with the piece when I made it the first time, was with this component. And I know a lot of you are really interested in wire wrapping, and so I'm excited to share this with you. I want to note that this first side, the side with the component, notice how I made that the link side. And notice how this skinny, fine side here, that side I used the toggle on that side. For the simple reason that the mechanics of this piece tells us that when I crimp it, and you can use any clasp on there, it doesn't have to be the toggle, but when you go ahead to close this toggle through, see how that 4 millimeter has to slide through the toggle loop? If this were opposite and my toggle was on this side and my loop was here, I might have, as my gran would say, Dickens of a time trying to put this in, because this bead would be getting in the way as you would, the toggle would bend, and it would be hard for me to get all of that through there, The Saturn bead would be in the way. So when you're using a toggle clasp, think if the two sides aren't exactly the same, you need to taper down so that the toggle bar can have a little elbow to bend.
And you could use a little piece of chain there too, if you felt like you kind of got to the end and things were a little bit tight. Right,
and I could have wire wrapped another smaller bead or something on there. But I also didn't want the neck here to be too visually skinny, I wanted to have kind of a nice chunky piece here going into that round. So, so for wire wrapping, we'll need this vintage find component. We'll need a couple of those Saturn beads, and then we'll need the loop of our toggle. And of course for wire wrapping, you guys, and we do have many wire wrapping tutorials on beadshop.com, but the basic tools that you're going to use, I'll just lay them out here real quick like so you can see them. We're going to use our nylon jaw, our wire straightening plier, we like to call it. I've got my Xuron flush cutters. I've got a chain nose, a straight chain nose, and a bent chain nose, and of course our round nose plier. Okay, and all of these guys, this is kind of your basic wire work set, right? So the wire that we're using, you could use, I don't know, any gauge. You could use 24, you could use 22, you could probably even use 20. 20 might be a little heavy when you wrap around.
It might be a little harder to going around your vintage find, but I think it would fit through the glass beads. No problem.
I think it would. But we kind of chose the happy medium. We pulled out some 22 gauge, and we used it in this brushed silver here colorway. And so I'm just going to go ahead, and before I even cut my wire off, I'm going to go ahead and use my nylon plier to just straighten this out. Because as you and I know, Emily, a nice unkinked wire is a happy wire for wire
It's a pleasure
wrapping.
to work with.
It is, indeed. So I know you're asking me, Kate, how much wire are you going to cut? I don't know. Let's cut about, I'm such a bad measurer. Let's cut about 8 inches. It'll give me plenty of room. This is just simple base metal craft wire. It's very inexpensive. And especially if you're experimenting a little bit with what you're doing, it's better to have a little bit more than a little less.
You know, I prefer to cut in about 1 foot long to 2 feet long. If I have a little leftover, then that leftover piece is sort of useful for something else.
Right, true enough.
Rather than making, 10
little
3-inch
short
pieces.
right,
Yeah, absolutely.
And once you've done one of these, it'll give you an idea about how long your other pieces need to be. Okay? So the way I started, let me pull this over here so we can have it for a visual reference. I kind of made a little multiple pass through the component here. So I'll go ahead and I'm going to put this one on the diagonal. So I'm going to come through and I'm going to go about halfway through the component. I'm going to go through, Brandon, I'm going to try and get this so you can see it.
I really liked how you did this. I thought it looked really nice. Sometimes when you have wire and meeting up with beads, you have to make some choices about gauge and things. And this, to me, made this piece look like the wire was a little bit more proportional because you did it twice.
I did it twice.
And it looks a little nicer and a little bit more artistically done.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And you can see on this hole, this guy here, the hole in this vintage find is a little smaller than the hole in this vintage find. So whatever you have, kind of tailor your wire wrapping to it. So I'm just going to go through twice.
And you
with
did
this.
You go through 3 times
I
on the
went
other
through
one?
3 times with the other one because I had a little bit more space. But I don't want to crowd this loop. So then all you do, and this would be the same, you guys, if I were turning this into an earring, right? I'm just going to come in, and you've seen me do this a little bit with our briolette wraps, but I'm going to come in, I'm going to tighten this up. I need this long piece of wire, and this wire here, I have left over maybe about 5 inches or so. That's going to be plenty for me to work with. But I'm going to take this short end, I'm going to bring it around at an angle, and I'm going to just give myself a couple of wraps. See how I'm just actually really doing this with my fingers. This craft wire is fairly soft, so I can just lay it one against the other, or I can use my chain nose if I want to.
And is that because you're using the 22, or with the different?
I think even with up to a 20 gauge, you'd probably be okay with
because
the craft
it's such
wire.
a soft. This is a fairly soft wire. It's dead soft. It's not half hard.
Right.
So
And even if you straightened it a little bit,
yeah, it won't work hard that much. So now with this end, you could spiral it up. You could do some other stuff with this, but I'm going to just cut it.
I sometimes like a little messy wrap in that same feeling of kind of building up the wire to look a little bit bigger.
Right, a little bulkier.
To give it a little bit more uniformity there.
So if I were doing that, and let's say that you chose to go with 24 gauge, and maybe this neck that I've wrapped might have been visually a little thin.
Right.
It would have been heavy enough to hold it.
Right.
But visually in a finer gauge, it might not look as sturdy as you want it. So just like Emily was stating, you could go back down. And you could lay them nicely, one below the other. Or maybe I can. Let me see here. It's a little, again, out of my vision range. There we go.
We're going to have to get magnifiers. I'm feeling like an old lady these days. I'm really
just
sad.
Can't see.
It's super sad.
Well, you know, it's one of those, better than the alternative, Emily, right?
Well, absolutely.
You know?
Right.
So I'm going to come in, and so see how I've just wire wrapped over the wire wrapping.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So it's a little bulkier, and it
bit.
shows a little bit more, which I sort of like.
And I'll come in with the tip of this flush cutter, holding my thumb over the extra wire so it doesn't fly up and hit me in the head, and clip it away.
Kimberly is asking about dead soft, half hard wire information. Yes, Kimberly, we are planning some more wire this year, and we will get into much more into discussions about that for sure.
The word for 2018 is wire.
That four-letter word again.
That's right. We're gonna wire it up. So see how I'm using this bent chain nose like a little pair of fingers, and I can come in and fine tune if I need to my wraps, and that's really what a bent chain nose. It's worth its weight in gold. It's earning its keep right there. Now you can see also that there's a little bit of movement here, and I don't know. I feel two ways about this. I don't mind the movement, right? But if you want to tighten it, you can.
I actually think the movement is good because I really think most of the time when you're making a change, you're changing material to material to material, that having the movement keeps it from being so
too stiff,
that it breaks or takes a bit of abuse that doesn't need to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you feel though like the piece is maybe a little too loose, see how I've grabbed one of those legs with my bent chain nose? I can give it, this is a signature Kate Richburg wire kind of little tweak. I can come in and give it a little turn, so it gives it a little flare, right?
Well, it's a little more interest.
Yeah.
Still.
And then I can come in, if it's still not as flat as I want it to be, I can gently squeeze it, give it a little hug, tiny little hug, with these nylon jaw pliers. So now this is ready to add a bead right here, like this.
Can I interrupt you for a
Yeah.
second? Can you remind me of the bracelets that you're wearing?
It's been getting so
much action.
It's really nice, the combo that you have going on there.
Send
It's
us
really
link
great.
to a treasure chest?
Yeah, so you guys, so this one was a loomed piece, and these I think all three of these I think might have been Free Tip Friday days. This was Free Tip Friday last week, the Chinese button knot and the leather braid. This was Free Tip Friday working with super duos, and these are actually the hex cut beads.
Oh, those
The hematite, but you could also use little shadows. And then this was my 3-part looming with delicas with 3 different patterns. And I think that was also, I think all 3 of them might have been Free Tip Fridays. So we'll link them also, but I think if you go to Free Tip Friday, you'll see all 3 of these made. They do look quite an attractive stack, I think.
Yeah. Well, and this, the other thing I like about this bracelet too is that wearing it as a bracelet, it becomes an instant stack.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to
And
wear
this one,
5 bracelets.
yeah.
You have one on.
And this one will add the stack. We'll
Perfect.
just add right in there.
Yep.
I think it'll be fun. So now let's finish our our wire wrap on this side. Okay, now this is just like a regular plain wire wrap, like you do any for an earring, for anything, like the pieces that are in your necklace, Emily. You can see I'm grabbing with the chain nose, and you can go into our skill builders, and you'll see how to make a wire wrapped loop. It's exactly what I'm doing here. I make that right angle, and I use the tip of that chain nose, and I bent the wire over the chain nose. And you can see I've got a, I don't know, a scant 1/8 of an inch, maybe. Just not even quite that. Then, if you see, you guys, you see how I'm pointing this round nose plier right at you, right there at the camera, and I have the heads one on top of the other. Okay? I'm going to bring that wire up and over, conforming it to the shape of this round plier. That's what gives me my round loop.
Using, with metal, if you want to get a shape, a consistent shape, you have to use a mandrel.
Yeah.
So a mandrel could be this jaw, this plier is the mandrel. It could be a ring mandrel, bracelet mandrel, all those things. But you have to bend it against something.
Against
or
something.
You don't get a consistent shape.
Right, because the roundness of the heads of this plier make the round, make the loop nice and round. Okay. So now, notice how I've taken my loop off of the top of the jaw, and I've put it on the bottom jaw. That allows me to bring my wire all the way underneath, and see how I've closed up that loop just like that. Now this is the trick that I think if you haven't done a lot of wire wrapping, this is what makes your loop really nice and centered. See how I've taken the tool out of the loop, and see how the loop is like all the way on this side. It's a little off kilter, right? It's not centered. What I do is I take my plier and I roll that loop back just a little, so that loop is centered over that center of the wire that's coming up below it, right?
I always think of this as the lollipop on the stick. You know, that large size lollipop that you want it to be
and
centered
this is the
right
little
on the strip.
scarf that wraps around the lollipop, right? And blowing in the wind, kind of. So now, before we get super excited, we need to get our clasp in, right? Because if we don't add our clasp, we're going to have to add it with the jump ring, and we don't want to do that. We want this to be one solid unit. So now, what I do is I hold this with my chain nose. And I kind of hold that loop in between where the toggle is, you can see that there, and exposing the neck of where I'm going to wrap, right? And I can use my hands, or I can use my bent chain nose, but I just carefully place my wire one below the other, and since I double wrapped this bottom wrap here, I'm going to go down, and then I'll go all the way back up so that both of these wraps look substantial. Okay? Just like that. So we've got this guy and this guy. All right? Now, I'm just going to come in, and I want you to get kind of tight in here, Brand, because I really want people, this is another thing that I know you guys have trouble with. Well, not all of you, but sometimes when you're a beginning wire wrapper, this is the thing. When I come in to clip away my extra, I'm going to wedge that clipper as close as I can. And see how the flat side of the wire cutter, pardon me, the flat side of the wire cutter is right up next to the wire wraps there. Okay? I'm going to hold on to that wire, and I'm going to clip. Now, you can see, if I point out on this side, I intentionally didn't wrap beyond here. I've got the tiniest of little spaces. That tiniest of little spaces is where I'm going to be able to tuck down this little extra piece of wire. If you don't leave just a little bit of air, like Janice likes to say, it's going to kind of, when you push that little tip in, it's going to throw all your wire wrapping off, right? So I'm going to do that little pushing of that tip in with my bent chain nose. And I just come in right where that wire is sticking out. I push it down. And then I kind of roll the tips along to make sure it's nice and tucked in. And if I need to fix my wraps just slightly, I can do that. And if I need to straighten my wire wrap loop, I can do that too. And I want to make sure that my loop for my clasp is facing the right way, in the same direction that this vintage find is sitting.
I like to move metal in small steps. And
Right.
so
Not one big flourish.
No, the Vulcan Death Grip does not apply to wire wrapping or metalsmithing at all. You want to do it in little stages because you have a chance to stop, or you have a chance to adjust as you're going along. And that to me makes it a world of difference. If you're trying to do it all in one go, nobody does it that way.
And you're going to kink your wire. You're going to kink your wire.
You're going to dent it or make a scratch on it.
And if the wire has a dent or a kink in it, it becomes a weak point in the wire.
Or it could be slightly unsightly.
Right. So I'm going to go ahead and wire wrap the other side. And I'm going to do it in a little bit more of Kate Richburg real time, because you saw me do that. So I'm going to come in with my wire, come around, get that through the loop of the clover, tighten it up. And these vintage finds are fairly substantial, but again, you don't want to be too heavy-handed when you're doing this, because this is a semi-precious stone, right? So we don't want to nick it or chip it. So I'm going to come in with my chain nose plier, and I'm going to tighten everything up. And I have one long end, one short end. I bring that short end around, and I'm going to wire wrap it. I did 3 wire wraps on the other side, so I'll do 3 wire wraps here so they match. And again, I have a little bit of movement, so I'm going to come in, spread these wires open just a little. Let me grab it, and then you guys can see it. And just give it a little half turn to tighten things up a bit. Then I've wrapped up, so now I want it to match the other side. So I'm going to wrap 3 wraps down below. 1, 2, and 3. Now remember, I don't close it all the way. I've got a little bit of space there. So I'm going to get my trusty Xuron flush cutter, wedge it right in, being careful not to nick any of the other wires. Thank you, Emily. Hold on to it so it doesn't fly, and press that little end wire in there. Pardon me. Now I'm going to add my Saturn bead, right? So let's add that guy on, and we're going to wire wrap the top. Bend at a right angle, and it does matter, not for this one so much, but this side it did matter. We wanted the loop to be going in this direction, so when we put the clasp on, the clasp would be facing correctly. This one, since we're going to attach it to the chain, it's not completely
not as critical.
Critical, yeah. So bend at an angle, up and over, down and underneath. And if you have trouble making your loops a consistent size, you can come in and you can get a Sharpie marker, and you can use that Sharpie to mark the head of your tool, and you can aim for wrapping the wire over that mark every time, so your loops will be consistent. So now, before I connect, you know what we have to do. We're going to get this chain. Now, what I did at this point was I didn't connect the chain quite yet. What I did was I went in and I closed off this side. I put a clasp on one side because I kind of mock everything up. So I'm going to set this aside for the moment, set my chain aside, and let's look at closing this off. Now, like we talked about before, I used one full strand. And Emily, when you strung this, you used one full strand and one full strand, right?
Actually, I had, since I used the shadows, which are a little bit bigger,
a little bit longer.
3 of the 6mm left over.
So let's compare it.
Maybe a dozen or so of the 4mm left
of the 4mm. Okay, and that's because
I think I'm pretty close.
As you said, Emily, you used the little shadow.
They're a little bit fatter.
They're a little bit fatter. So this length for me, and I wear my finished bracelet is about 7 1/4 inches, but since this is a bracelet that wraps, you need just a little more air.
Right.
As well.
So you're thinking that you're making 5 wraps, and you divide that by, or times it times 7 1/4, and that's kind of getting you in the ballpark.
In the ballpark.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I'm going to measure this portion so you guys can see what this is. Door to door, well, the beading portion of this is just shy of 14 inches. Okay? So I made this 2 bracelets worth.
Right.
Right? 7 and 7 is what I did. So I used, and I don't have this laid out.
One more thing before we do that. Let's have your wrist. And actually, let me go this way.
Lower.
Sorry.
Lower.
Yeah.
This way?
So when we look at the bracelet length of the beads around your wrist, there's just a smidge of overlap, it looks like, in
just
the beads.
Touch.
Yeah. So a bead or two's worth, not counting this guy, of overlap. Okay. I just wanted to see where that kind of landed on you and how that looked.
So I'm going to go ahead and you can see I closed it off here with our wire guard and our crimp cover. You saw us do this last week with our Gatsby wrap, so I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. We have some great skill builders on beadshop.com that that show how to do this, and we've done it again and again on Facebook Live. But one of the things I wanted to mention were the wire guards. Now, this wire guard, especially with this bracelet, that's going to get a lot of play. It's going to have a lot of, I don't know, on and off. It's going to, it's not like a necklace that just sits on your neck.
I'm not a big fan of the wire guardians because I think they're kind of bulky. But when you're marrying soft flex and chain, I think that this kind of fits in well with it, and it does look a little more like it's the
looks
chain.
a little more finished, yeah.
Finish.
Yeah.
It kind of matches it a little bit better. One of the things we have to remember to do coming up is doing the bullion wire.
Yeah.
Because I would really love to show people how to make their own.
I really like to use the bullion wire as well, though I find it's a little more delicate than something like this.
Well, that's why you make your homemade.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of ways you can also use little beads and stuff like that to go around the edge. So this wire guard, what I do is it gives me, what I like about it is, it gives me just the right amount of loop for this clasp to have some movement. So I slide this guy up and I put my soft flex through my crimp tube, and again slide all of that up, and I'm not worried about the slack in my piece as of yet. Now this is another tip when people are using the wire guards. See how when I'm trying to kind of shove the crimp tube up against the wire guard's like a little horseshoe. The little legs are far apart. So what I want to do is I want to come in and give it a gentle squeeze.
So you're closing the horseshoe up into a teardrop now.
I am. And see how I can get that crimp right up there. So there's not, I need to have just a touch of space because the crimp cover needs somewhere to sit. So if I have the tiniest of tiny openings here. That's where the edge of the crimp cover is going to sit. Okay, so now I'm going to get my Xuron crimping plier, and I'm going to come in. The cords, the threads of my soft flex are laying side by side. I come into the crimping section of the plier, and I'm making sure that my whole crimp tube is covered, and I flatten. You can see that little tooth there pushes down and makes a nice little ridge.
So one of the things I love about
nice little valley
crimping pliers is that, bring them back in again if you would, the width of the metal of the crimping tool and
here,
the width of the 2x2 millimeter crimp
are
the
almost
same.
exactly the same. Right.
And so it's very easy to do the right crimp with these.
Right.
If you find that your crimp was hanging out either to the left or the right of your tool, just slide over and crimp it again.
Yeah.
So that you've crimped the entire length of the tube.
Right, because if you don't crimp the entire length and you go ahead and close it, it's going to open it.
Right. And if you have longer crimps, if you happen to be using a 3x3, then you'll have to crimp twice.
Crimp in each, kind of across
each station.
Yeah,
we have
across the tube.
A couple of questions. One is, are crimp tubes better than round crimp pearls?
Yes, round crimp beads, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hands down. And it's because they crimp nice and flat, and the result is here. Round crimp beads leave air.
Well, and round crimp beads don't have as much surface area touching the plier.
Right. So yes.
And the other question that a number of people have asked is, what is the difference between soft flex and Fireline?
So soft flex is a nylon coated wire beading cable that's
literally
twisted wire.
Literally inside this cable that you see here is very fine, thin, twisted wires. So this particular cable has 21 strands inside of it.
Right, twisted.
Twisted together with a nylon coating on the outside. So that nylon coating makes it very smooth and keeps all the
flexible
wires together. The more wires you have, the more strands you have, the more flexible it is. And this kind of makes sense because if you think, what's more flexible, 21 little wires or 7 big wires?
Yeah.
So they're really talking about the thinnest of thin wires. And that gives you that really beautiful, flexible drape.
And we use this this 21 strand, this .014, a lot. Because we use a lot of lighter beads. So we use this one quite a bit. Fireline is, well, it's a thread. It's not a wire.
Right. And
but it's
braided.
a wiry thread.
Feels wiry, but it wouldn't, if you kink soft flex, and you can kink it pretty easily, if you are rough with it and fold it,
that kink will stay forever.
That kink is permanent now.
Yeah.
But
like
in
that.
Fireline, you can kink it, move it around, do all those things.
Yeah.
It's more of a tube braid, so it's round. It doesn't have the nylon coating on the outside, although it feels very slippery and plasticky, and it is all those things.
And I would use it for seed bead work. I wouldn't use it for this bracelet.
No,
it's not.
You could use it for stringing if you were having really
multiple strands,
small holes.
Yeah, and I would double the strand at least. But for something like this, you need a workforce like soft flex.
And I think the thing that both soft flex and Fireline share is that they're incredibly abrasion resistant.
Yeah.
So Fireline is super nice when you need a very thin but strong thread that may be rubbing up against some metal beads or some stone that's a little bit rough around the edges.
So now with that first part where I crimped the crimp tube, put that little valley into it, now I'm going to fold it. So I move it to, there's 3 little openings here besides the crimper and the crimping plier. That middle one is the one for the 2x2 crimp tube, which is what I'm using. And if I look down the head of this tool, I can see the little valley that I crimped into this. And I just come in and I gently squeeze the plier closed, so you can see I folded that crimp tube like a little taco, folded it in half. Then I come back in and I give it just an extra gentle little hug with the tips, kind of the chain nose portion of the tips of this plier. So I really make sure that everything, I'm going to get a little closer to my line of vision here so I can see it, but I make sure that everything is closed. And I'm really very mindful when I do this because I don't want the plier to slip and nick the edge of my crimp tube or inadvertently flatten my wire guard.
I want to keep it all looking good.
Now, I come in, and I know that we differ on this, Em. I come in, and I cut next to the crimp. And it's my philosophy that your crimp tube is either crimped, closed, or it's open. And if you feed that wire back down through several beads, pardon me, it's not going to keep this from coming open, right? It may for a short period of time, but this crimp is going to slide and your necklace will come apart. So really make sure this is crimped and closed.
Well, and of course, we can always differ, Kate. My feeling about soft flex is that it is incredibly durable and strong. There is a small potential for soft flex to do a tiny bit of stretching. I feel that if I'm cutting it right off at the crimp, then there's just a small chance that stretch could be happening where it would pull the soft flex into the crimp and loosen its end.
Yeah.
So I tend to go under, if I can, if it's possible, and within the design itself, I tend to go under a couple of beads. And I don't go, miles along, but a couple of beads is my go-to process.
I have a tendency, once that crimp is, or that soft flex is cut, or if I feed it back through, sometimes it has a tendency to work its way out, and I end up cutting it anyway. So
I tend to go through the beads before I crimp, and that tends to, for me, keeps it in place. Yeah.
So I put my crimp cover over my crimp, and you can see I've just nestled the crimp right in it. And then I just use my crimping pliers, the rounding portion of my crimping pliers, to kind of close that really gently. And then you can see that opening is kind of on the top. I hold and I turn that opening towards the top of my plier, and I give it one more little hug, and that helps me to close everything up. But I use the crimping plier to actually just gently...
Again, moving metal with multiple steps.
Yeah, multiple steps, not one big sweeping gesture. Okay, and you can see that's closed. So now we're on the home stretch to closing this guy. So I'm going to get my component wherever I tossed it. I tossed it somewhere. Here it is. It's right there. It's staring right at me. So I'm going to connect my other end of my chain on this side, and you'll see why. You'll see why. I always say when you're making these kind of fancier bracelets, right, or multiple strand bracelets, that it's kind of like making a couture outfit, right? You want to make sure that you're getting kind of multiple. You don't make a fancy dress and just make it right off the pattern, right? You got to try it on several times. So that's what we're going to do, is we're going to mock this up.
Are you going to have a fitting?
We're going to have a fitting. We're going to have an official fitting. And notice I'm so excited I'm closing that back up. I don't want to do that. What I need to do is I want to make sure that when I cut my chain, I didn't nick this little link right here. It's fine. So it's not opened. It's nice and closed. And I'm going to bring it in to the wire guard. Now, the thing is, you guys, I don't want to make this too tight, because if you go ahead and you crimp and close a necklace or a bracelet that's strung on soft flex, if you don't give it a little bit of room or a little bit of breathing room, it's going to be very stiff and it's not going to drape nicely. And I think that's students who start out with the soft flex, I think it's a complaint. People say, oh, but soft flex is so stiff.
Well, and one of the nice things about adding a spacer bead is that it does give your beads a little bit of a joint. And if I were to look at this just temporarily strung strand and pinch it very tightly so that there's no extra air in there, and then try and fold it into a circle. I can make a circle, it's just not a very pretty one, right? It's a little bit awkward. The beads are binding on each other just a little bit. Even now when I release that little bit of extra string, I have a much prettier circle. It's more round, but it's still kind of
has that stiffness to it.
binding up on one another. So having that little spacer in there gives you
a little bit of elegance to the strand.
Yeah,
I think.
it's a functional thing that nobody knows about.
And
A seed bead could be in there.
Yeah,
a
seed
knot
bead.
and thread could be in there.
Anything that gives it a little bit of air. So what I do here is I want to push all of these strands around so that my bead is sitting up next to that crimp cover. Okay. Now all of my slack here is up here by this loop. So I'm going to come in. I'm going to come through my crimp, and I put my finger on the loop and I just walk it down just like that. And I'm going to close the little horseshoe. I'm going to take it from a horseshoe to a teardrop, tighten it up one more time. And I'm going to check. I'm going to actually put this.
Make a circle.
You can make 2 circles, even if you want, because that's kind of how this is going to wrap. But I double check to make sure that has some spring or some movement. Is what I mean to say.
So there was a question about using crimps on elastic and stretch magic. And I am not a fan of that. I like to knot. I know that there are people who do, but I find that that crimp is can be kind of sharp around the edge.
I actually like I use the crimp for stretch magic sometimes. I like to knot it too. I do. But sometimes when I use the crimp on stretch magic, I use a larger one, like a 3x3.
Right.
And I use them maybe side by side. So I double crimp it.
Got it.
Right. So there's a crimp over here, a crimp over here. Right.
Perfect.
So
I've
used it.
crimping question.
Yeah, I was
too.
just I was like, here we go.
Yeah.
So I don't usually do a double crimp where the crimps are side by side, but I will occasionally move a crimp bead
down here.
below a little bit, so it has a little bit of a spot to give a little extra security. Yes.
And you can cover that crimp with a crimp cover down here as well, so it, you know, just
so it marries in.
Yeah, marries in.
Just like we did last week with the pearl necklace.
So my soft flex is laying side by side. Slipped a little bit, so let me turn everything around, make sure everything looks good. I'm going to crimp. I'm going to fold. I'm going to cover this sucker with a crimp cover. Okay. I'm going to cut away my extra. Now, sometimes if you have trouble, if you really want to get this nice and close, I'll hold this soft flex with my chain nose plier, and
So
see
you're
how I
cutting
have
under
the back.
tension.
Yeah, and I don't want to make. I want to make sure that I don't nick the crimp tube, but I crimp it so I get a nice close cut right up next to that crimp tube. Now I'm going to grab a cover, slide that around the crimp tube. Sometimes I hold, I guess it depends on the day. Last week I was holding my crimp cover in my crimping plier.
Somebody wanted to see those dots again when you get a moment.
Yeah, so the dots, this is something that Janice put on here when we first started using this tool. This yellow dot kind of identifies the crimping part of this plier, and then the 3mm, 2mm, and 1mm crimping chambers. So it kind of shows you where you're aiming if you're having a little trouble seeing the piece. And if you don't get that crimp in there nice and straight and you start to close the crimp cover, it doesn't quite work. So let me see if I can finagle that in there. Yep, there it goes. I'm going to close it, and then I come in and kind of press on the seam just gently to get that crimp closed. And that crimp cover, you guys, gives yourself gives you or takes up a little bit of room. So you need to have, don't discount the amount of slack that you really do need for this piece. So when I was making this original bracelet, what I did was I cut the chain like we sell it in the 2-foot length, and then I mocked up the length. So you can see here, I can just slide the chain through, and this is a great way to check the sizing. So Emily, I'm going to size this on you.
Okay.
So I started by just like so, and I'm just going to, is this in the right space?
Just a little bit, keep it low.
Okay.
Good.
Not too low because I got to wrap under it.
Yeah, you're perfect.
And we're going to, oh, say that again, Brandon. I love the sound of that. So you can see with Emily how this gives her, this whole 2 feet gives you a lot of chain wrap, but nothing's meeting up.
Why don't you untwist that chain just a little bit?
Oh, here at the end?
Yeah.
I'm going to take it out of here anyway.
All right.
So let's put your wrist down this way. So what I need to do is I need to bring this guy here. That's where this is going to go. And I'm going to take this, yeah, perfect. I'm going to take this chain link off. This is when beading with a friend really works out. You can close this up.
You're so sneaky.
I am, sneaky pants. And now let's turn you just a little bit.
I can roll my wrist over.
Yeah, let's do that. Because I can see, let's turn it just here. I can see, oh, that's about where I need to be. So I'm going to grab it. But I don't cut anything.
Cutting chain always the last step.
Yeah.
That way you can go back.
I'll slide it in here. And I will undo this. We want to make sure that this keyhole chain is not kinked. Let's wrap it round. Wrap it round.
Move your arm forward just a little bit towards the, I know it's not very comfortable.
No, it's
And
okay. I'm
close
just
it.
trying to make it steady.
So let's see how that, so move your wrist around. Let's pretend that this is closed. And you can see on this one, this longer section, this is where this would sit, like kind of like on the top of your wrist. If you do have a shorter wrist, you can omit one of these Saturns. You could use a bead that was smaller, right?
You could use one of the 6 millimeters if you wanted.
And so this looks about right.
I agree.
So I'm going to take it off of you completely.
Oh, I get a new bracelet
Take
today.
it off. Remove the bracelet, Ms. Miller. And let's go ahead and wire wrap this closed. So I'm going to come in, and before I wire wrap it, I am going to make sure it's in the right loop, which it actually is not. So I'm going to take this one out. If I look at the loop, I need it to go in this little ending loop here. So I'm going to cut this chain away just using my
I think Jackie was
cutters.
asking earlier about having a hard time cutting this chain. And, you know, Jackie, on a heavy chain like this, go to the smallest part.
Right.
Cut that.
Right.
And then you may need to bend it open with your pliers to get it to remove.
a little bit.
Yep.
So I'm going to come in, I'm just going to clip it there, covering it, and then, yep, that just opened everything up and just comes right off. What I do, though, I always remove, if there's a link that's damaged, I remove it so I don't inadvertently use it later. Okay? So I'm going to clip it on this side, and I have to come in and clip it on this side. There we go. And it's off. And now I have just a nice little piece of chain that I can use for a different project. So I'll put this guy right into my chain link. And you could make, you know, when I was designing this piece, I was thinking, oh, maybe I'll use more chain. Maybe I'll use 2 styles of chain or whatever. So you don't have to use just a single style. But I'll come in and let's wire wrap this closed. One below the other, and down, and then back up over the top of that wrap. clip away your remaining wire, again being mindful not to hit yourself in the head with any flying wire. Grabbing your bent chain nose plier to bend that little guy in. And you can see with this connection, you can, you know, slightly bend it so it sits, conforms nicely to your wrist, like that. Okay, so let's wind this one up, and you can see there is a lot of nice movement here in this piece. And let's get our the copper penny. We've got silver mint, which is this one, and copper penny, which is the original. There we go, just like that. I think they're kind of okay. What do you think?
I really like them both.
I like them too.
Yeah. I think this is this little cloverleaf guy with going diagonally, you know, tip to tip instead of straight across is really nice.
I think it's nice.
Yep.
And you could also, if you wanted to take this, you know, if you wanted to gild the lily, as it were, you could wire wrap, like, especially if you have some of the, you know, extra Saturns, or if you have extra of these beads, you could get head pins and wrap them as little dangles and stuff like that.
We could do it right off there.
Yeah, you could. Or you could also wrap it right off there. You could wrap it off the toggle. It really just depends on what works for you. But I think that this connection between the oh, you know what? I was so excited to show this on you. I didn't put in the other link. So what I could do, if I went, oh my goodness, what have I done at this point? All hope is not lost.
Oh, for sure.
All I would do is I'd cut this chain link.
Right.
I'd wire wrap and I'd put this Saturn in here. And all I would do is I would reduce it by
a couple links,
1, 2, 3, maybe 4 links. So I'll do that after the broadcast, and I'll add that one in. But it's not a have to. But I was all, wait a minute, I'm missing a Saturn. I only have 3 Saturns in here.
Of live
right,
television.
of live television. That's right. So something like this, all hope is not lost. Clip that chain link, wire wrap a Saturn to this side, and then just reduce it by the number of chain links so you don't make it too long. Okay. So no big. Okay. So let's move that camera out, Brandwin, and I guess our last Facebook Live of 2017.
It's kind of a milestone.
It's literally
a year end
wrap.
I know.
Wrap. All wrapping together. As always, we have a couple of little fun items for you to close this up. Today is the 27th, right, of December, our last week.
Yeah.
And so we have, if you opened your newsletters today, and this one was all Janice, she said, I want to do something fun for Facebook Live. So she said, Kate, it's the 27th. Let's take
27%.
Crazy, but it's good today. Only.
It's good. Make it hard to calculate. Excellent.
Make it right. It's the 27th on 27 on the 27th. So if you're shopping all day today on December 27th, if you're watching this live or a little bit later today, our store-wide sale ends tonight at midnight Pacific time. But if you throw WRAP 27 as your coupon code, it'll knock 27% off your order, which is just crazy. It's awesome.
It's crazy.
We also, Janice was testing out some new, you know how much we love our Czech beads here at beadshop.com. And we were testing out a few new sizes and stuff. This is a bead that we don't carry. We carry it in a different size.
Right.
This is our beloved, you guys know this bead, and if you don't,
so cute.
It's our beloved melon bead, but it's a 4mm rather than our normal 6. And we have it in kind of this Picasso dark ruby finish. And it's just a nice little strand of 4 millimeters. And so that's today's giveaway.
I would mix some shadows with that and make a stretchy bracelet.
In
a minute.
In no time.
Yep.
And it would look great.
Yeah, it would. Would add
You
extra
know,
texture to that.
extra texture. You can make an extra round in your wrap bracelet. It's really fantastic. So if it's just after noon Pacific time. If you place an order between right now and 1 p.m. Today on 12/27, 1 p.m. Pacific time, and in your order notes you write melons, please. We're going to throw in. We will. We'll cut you. You'll get a strand of these wonderful little 4 millimeter melons.
They're really cute, and I love the texture.
It's such a great giveaway. Yep. I saw them on Barandwin's desk yesterday, and she said, "Oh, Kate, no, these are going back." I said, "No, they're not. They're going to the giveaway.
Give me that.
Give me those melon beads." So that's it. So we're going to start 2018 with some really fun projects. I'll see you this Friday for Free Tip Friday, where I'm going to share something exciting. I don't know what yet, but I'll come up with it. But for 2018, we've got a lot of fun projects planned for you. We're going to do a lot of wire. I know you have a lot of fun things for Seed Bead School. Next week, you're going to see a kit that we're going to release that you're going to use in Seed Bead School.
Because you need to start working on that next gift-giving occasion.
It's so awesome. It's really great. So you'll see that next week. And then next week's project, to start the new year, we're going to do some tassel work with chain and the new monthly mix for January. So that's going to be fun. And then later on in the month, Janice is going to be here to do her bracelet project.
Janice, I'm looking forward to seeing you in person.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
It's not the same over the phone.
Yeah, we are so glad you're coming back for a visit, albeit brief. And then we've got some other things. I've got a color study wrap bracelet we're going to do. So January is going to be fun, and we'll sail.
Busy.
Yeah, we're going to sail on through to February. We've got some great things, but 2018 is all about wire and some fun.
I have an
stuff.
idea for you for Free Tip Friday.
Oh, I can't wait to
I'll tell
hear
you when we get off
after the broadcast.
Yeah.
All right, you guys. Well, thank you so much for making our 2017 so special. We could not and would not do this without you. We really, really appreciate your support of our small business. If you haven't done so already, you can hop over to kind of our Facebook community, which is beadshop.com, the bead table. We'd be glad to welcome you there. There's all kinds of really wonderful inspiration
and really wonderful
great fellowship.
folks. Yep.
That happens over there.
If you feel like you're beading alone, you really aren't.
No, all you have to do is jump in and join us at the bead table. We have viewers and participants worldwide.
Well, and with lots of experiences and tips and things they want to share with you, and certainly getting everyone to help you out. I've seen a couple recently of folks with the head scratchers of, I don't understand why this is happening, and
so
they've
you
gotten
get a
lots
lot
of response.
Really great perspective, not only from us, but from our fellow designers over there as well. Well, that wraps up our final broadcast. Brandon, thank you as always for your wonderful camera work. Janice, thank you for your wonderful moderating. And thank you so much for the hearts. And we really, really...
Gita, feel better.
Yeah,
we'll see you next week.
Happy birthday to Angela's mom.
Oh, happy birthday, Angela's
who
mom.
got her started. She misses her today, but
that's
today was her
great.
birthday,
Oh,
and we got
happy
her started
birthday.
beading.
That's
so
awesome.
I thought that was sweet.
Well, you guys have a safe and prosperous new year, and we'll see you guys. I'll see you Friday for Free Tip Friday, and we'll see you next week for our first broadcast of 2018. That's right. All right.
Ay, caramba.
We'll see you
Bye,
guys soon.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Bye-bye.
joining us.
Happy
Bye-bye.
New Year.